All right. So, hi, everybody. Thanks for being here. This is the Midwinter Ewe Management presentation. And my name is Meg Witherbee. I live in northern Vermont. I have a flock of usually around like 20 to 25 breeding ewes. And then this will be my eighth year lambing, my eighth kind of breeding and lambing season. So I know some stuff, but I'm by no means an expert. So I hope at the end when we're discussing stuff, I'd love if other people chimed in with their experience, because like I said, I am not the expert at all on this. But we can sort of go over the basics. So in today's presentation, we'll talk about mainly second and third trimester nutritional needs for the ewe. Those two things are very different. Um, we'll talk about gestational diseases. Gestational diseases aren't really an issue till like the very end, like the last 2 to 3 weeks of pregnancy. However, a lot of the sort of nutritional management that happens now can affect, late gestation diseases, metabolic diseases. And so it's important. It's kind of like setting yourself up now for success towards the end of pregnancy. We'll talk about vitamin and mineral needs during pregnancy. And then we'll go through like kind of a standard midwinter health check, hoof trims, body condition scoring, FMACHA scoring, dental checks, things like that. The most important one of this list is the body condition scoring, which we'll talk about more thoroughly because that um, is just a really good indicator of sort of where your ewes are at and any issues that may need to be corrected in terms of overfeeding or underfeeding fat in ewes. We'll talk about what seems to always be kind of a burning question every year, shearing before or after lambing. And then we'll sort of end with like a midwinter to-do list, ordering vaccines, scheduling spring shearing, things like that. Those are all, whoops, I just lost my page. Hold on. Ah, sorry. One sec. Here we go. Um, yes. All right. Back on track. Ordering ear tags, things like that. And then we'll end with like a discussion and Q&A session. All right. So gestational nutrition. Um, in a grass-fed program, this is talking about the hay that you're feeding during gestation. Basically, kind of like the takeaway for gestational nutrition is if you feed hay that's cut at an early palatable stage that isn't moldy or dusty and is stored well, it will likely meet your nutritional needs regardless of the specific makeup or grasses that compose the hay. That being said, not all hay is created equal. And we'll kind of just run through like the different cuts of hay, when they're going to be cut, and talk about how that affects the nutritional composition of the hay. So early first cut is often considered some of the best hay. It's really high in both energy in the form of sugar and cellulose and carbohydrates, and also protein. It's really great for late gestation, third trimester, when the ewe's energy needs are the highest. Second cut is, again, second cut that's cut early during kind of July and August, has very good energy and protein content, more digestible and a little less stemmy than first cut. And it's great, again, for late gestation and especially lactation, since it has a little bit higher protein content. Third cutting is often a little lower in energy content. It's usually pretty leafy, so it's easily digestible, but it's still good quality, but just sort of the least nutritious of the cuttings. That's hay cut sort of, well, the third cutting, obviously, but usually cut in kind of end of September when the grasses are starting to go dormant. And so it's still valuable. It's great to feed sort of during like second trimester when the demands of pregnancy are a little bit lower on the ewe. It's also great for feeding your rams if you separate your rams out. And then late cut hay or single cut hay. So late cut hay is just any.
Oh no.
No. Is that done?
Anybody not speaking, please mute.
Hello? Is that okay? I'm just gonna, oh, there we go. Okay. Um, great. Thanks for that, Diane. Let's see. So, yeah, so late cutting hay is just less nutritious, pretty unpalatable. And so when you're buying hay, it's just good to pay attention to kind of where you are in the season, when the hay's been cut. You know, if it's like the end of July and your hay guy's like, I got first cut for you, no go. That's way too late for first cut. Um, Alfalfa is a lot of people buy that in like buy the bale, pure alfalfa. It's super high in protein and calcium. The downside it can sometimes be expensive. Alfalfa is excellent for lactation when the protein and calcium needs are really, really high on the ewe. It can be a little bit dicey feeding alfalfa during pregnancy just because that high calcium can cause issues with hypocalcemia, and high protein content can grow monster lambs that don't like to get born. So if you do buy an alfalfa, save it for lactation. It's excellent for that. Another thing to consider year to year is the weather. Rain is definitely something to keep an eye on. Heavy rain washes out the soluble sugars and minerals like vitamins A, D, and E, and a lot of the energy in the grass can be washed away by rain. And so that's just something that's good to keep an eye on. Again, like as the season goes on, you know, if there's like 3 weeks of heavy rain and then, you know, your first cut gets cut or your second cut, you know, you might want to just keep that into consideration when you're deciding which feed to hay out, because that hay will probably be a little bit less nutritious, having had the energy and minerals washed out of it. And then just as a side note, vitamin A, D, and E, those water-soluble vitamins are really high in fresh grass, but pretty much they go way down when hay is dried. And so supplemental A, D, and E is recommended during the winter hay feeding season. And so all this is just kind of good, like I said, to keep in mind as the season goes on, you can kind of like, and you're bringing your hay in, you can just sort of allocate like, oh, I got this really early, like end of May first cut. That's beautiful. I'm going to save it for, you know, the last few months of pregnancy, or, oh, this cut's a little bit later. I'm going to, you know, save it for second trimester. It's kind of nice to just sort of map out your hay content and have a plan for what you need. 1 second. Sorry. Hey, I can't talk right now. Can you guys go back in there? Okay. I'll be out in a minute. Sorry. This is a really helpful graph. Hey, sweetheart, go back in there. I'll be right there. Sorry. This is a really helpful graph to demonstrate that what we were talking about with that earlier cut hay. So forage maturity has the greatest impact on hay quality. Basically, like what stage of maturity your hay was cut. So as you can see, these two lines down here, the solid line, which is protein, and then this dotted line, which is carbohydrates, which is basically energy. During the leafy stage of the hay, they're pretty low. And then as the hay is just kind of setting its head, that's sort of when the protein and energy content are and then as this grass blooms, I'm getting that echo again.
Meg, can you mute RM's iPhone? I think is where it's coming from. Or
yeah.
Oh, they may have just disappeared actually.
Okay.
Actually, Meg, if you make me co-presenter, I can take care of muting folks in case that happens again.
Oh, sure. Let me hop out of here and see if I can do that.
We should have done that at the beginning.
Yeah, let me see. How is that just on the side? Make host, allow to record.
Yeah, or if you click on like the dots next to me,
Yeah.
probably have like
I don't see make co-presenter as an option.
Oh.
Okay.
We can just move on.
Sorry, yeah. If it keeps happening, I'll check in with that. But Thanks for bearing with that, everybody. Um, and what were we saying? Yeah, so when basically like what this is what I was saying, that late cut hay that's in bloom, you can see how drastically the protein and especially the energy content goes down. And so that's just I really like this chart as a visual to just sort of keep in mind with the timing of when your hay is cut. And if you're getting hay from a good hay person, it's usually not an issue. They know when to cut their hay. All right, so second trimester, which is where we are right now. The second trimester of pregnancy, the demands of fetal growth are still pretty moderate during the second trimester. The second trimester is largely when placental growth happens, and it's largely unaffected by the nutrients in your hay. So this is really the time the demands of pregnancy are the lowest. You can kind of get away with underfeeding some fat ewes moderately, overfeeding some skinnier ewes. It's kind of this really great corrective period when you can get your ewes set up heading into third trimester and heading into lambing. So at this point, ewes are fine on kind of a maintenance diet. So that means basically similar to what they would eat otherwise. They need about 3% of their body weight in hay per day. This is about 3 to 4 pounds of hay per ewe for, sort of the average 120 to 150 pound ewe. So during this time in the second trimester, it's really important to spend some time refining your minerals, feed your ewes well, but don't overfeed, and really use this time to correct fat or thin ewes. We'll talk about body condition scoring in a little bit, but like I said, moderate undernutrition, about half a body condition score can be tolerated for most ewes. Definitely only this time of pregnancy. As soon as you get sort of 7 weeks, definitely 6 weeks before your lambs are due, you're going to want to really change your feed program. But during this time, kind of January and February, you can get away with a little bit. And just again, as a little side note, high energy hay, which is first cut, is really helpful during super cold nights. It helps ewes stay warm. So that's good to have a little hay reserved for super, super cold nights, a little first cut. So third trimester nutrition. During the last 6 weeks of pregnancy, lambs do about 70% of their growing. So you can imagine that's like a really, really taxing time on the ewe. That's a ton of energy and protein and minerals and vitamins they're pouring into that lamb growth. During this time, you want to just really focus on feeding the best quality hay that you have. Grain supplementation is unnecessary, despite what most things you read or most articles that say you need to supplement grain during third trimester with Icelandics. You don't need to do that. You can get away with just quality hay. During the third trimester, the energy needs of the ewe are the highest, but feed intake can be limited due to the size of the lambs in utero. The rumen is really, really small with those lambs taking up all that space. So that's why it's so important to feed high quality hay during that time. Quality first or second cut will likely meet the nutritional needs for energy and protein of the pregnant ewe, as long as, like we said, it was cut early in the cycle and not overly mature. Overfeeding super rich hay like alfalfa can result in giant lambs and cause dystocia, and it can also lead to metabolic diseases like hypocalcemia. And then used with twins during the third trimester need about 4% of their body weight per day in hay, which for a 140-pound ewe is about 5.5 pounds of hay per day. And it's pretty easy to calculate the amount of hay each ewe needs. So you can just like throw a bale on a scale, see how much it weighs, plug in the formula of about 5.5 pounds of hay per day per ewe, and you can figure out how much hay you're going to be feeding out per day, and feed adequately, without over underfeeding. It's really important during the third trimester, especially to make sure that there's ample room at the feeders. The ewes are really big. They're really, really woolly. And this is where older and smaller ewes can get boxed out and miss out on their caloric needs. So it's helpful, to maybe have like 2 or maybe even 3 feeders a main feeder and then some littler auxiliary feeders, just so that those ewes that get boxed out can still eat. And during this time with larger flocks, or if you have a lot of older ewes or ewes who are more prone to gestational diseases, or who you're more worried about getting gestational diseases, you can separate them out and ensure they have adequate feed. Same goes for younger, like if you're breeding one winter ewes, you can maybe put them in their own pen if you want to make sure they don't get overfed. But generally, feeding everybody all together, good quality hay, you should be in good shape. This is a helpful chart that, again, just shows that last late pregnancy. You can see like that huge boom in demand on the ewe with that super rapid fetal growth. This here, where we are now, mid-pregnancy, the kind of like 30 to 90 day time, there's not a whole lot going on. And so that's why you can get away with, kind of correcting ewes that need correcting during this time. Let's see, ultrasounds. Pregnancy ultrasounds aren't required, but they can be useful in determining litter sizes and seeing if any ewes were left open. If you're, you might want to re-expose that ewe, or if you don't really like her for being left open, you can consider culling. But it can be helpful to just sort of see midwinter where your flock is at, what the litter sizes are for all the ewes. And then, if you have a lot of ewes carrying triplets, you can consider separating them out, feeding them a little extra, giving them more room at the feeder. And it's also helpful to roughly know numbers. When planning for spring lambing, if you have a bigger flock, you have those ewes with triplets, and you're like, okay, I have these girls and they're lambing on these days and they have triplets. It's a lot easier to plan for grafting when you go in and sort of like have a plan in place. If that's something that you want to do in your lambing management, then it would be useful to do ultrasounds. And it's also kind of nice to know for your numbers for summer grazing and things like that. The best time to do ultrasounds is 45 to 60 days after conception, which is kind of right around now. So get on it if you're thinking about it. All right, we'll talk now about metabolic gestational diseases. Like I said, these aren't really an issue until the end of pregnancy, but a lot of what we do now can help us avoid them down the line. So it's helpful to just kind of know what they are and what you're sort of looking at. So the two main gestational diseases are ketosis and hypocalcemia. Hypocalcemia is also known as milk fever. But we'll just kind of quickly go over this. So ketosis is when the developing fetus, which has such high metabolic activity, and it creates an increased demand for glucose on the ewe. The glucose levels of the ewe drop because of this, and this triggers the ewe's body to mobilize fat deposits. The fat deposits infiltrate the liver and slow its capacity to produce glucose. And when this happens, the liver converts fat to ketones, and when the ewe has a high ketone level, it drastically reduces her appetite. So it's basically like this self-feeding system where the ewe's not getting enough to eat, and then basically her appetite is suppressed, and she really quickly goes downhill. Ewes will stop eating and appear disoriented. It's a pretty hard one to correct. I have lost a ewe before to ketosis. And it's kind of like when you notice it, it's a little too late. If it's caught super early, you can treat it with propylene glycol drenches. But prevention is really key. You want to feed good quality feed and have properly conditioned ewes. Both skinny ewes and really fat ewes are at risk for ketosis. So again, this kind of second trimester is great to try and correct those really fat or really skinny ewes and avoid these down the line, avoid ketosis and hypocalcemia down the line. With hypocalcemia, the third trimester fetal bone development places a very high demand for calcium on the ewe. Calcium needs during pregnancy aren't met, or they can be exceeded, not in the case of fetal bone development, but If they're exceeded, it can cause hypocalcemia, so you don't want to supplement calcium either. Um, Both cases suppress calcium mobilization to meet the ewe's needs. These signs of hypocalcemia include muscle tremors, droopy cold ears, laying down with legs splayed out. Hypocalcemia is a little bit easier to correct. It responds really quickly to subcutaneous calcium gluconate at a rate of 60 cc per 100 pounds. Again, good quality hay plus mineral mix will have sufficient calcium. You don't need to supplement calcium. If you're suspicious that a ewe is calcium deficient, which you can confirm with a blood test, you can use limestone with that specific ewe, but don't just start putting limestone in your mineral mix. Hay and minerals will have enough for your ewe. Again, this is a risk for very fat or very skinny ewes. So this brings us to our midwinter health checks, which is the time to kind of determine who, or if there's any ewes that you need to kind of pay a little closer attention to. This sort of standard midwinter health check, whoops, it's a great time to trim hooves before the ewes get too pregnant, excuse me. You can check famachas, which a lot of times, or in the winter, where a lot of parasites are dormant, so often ewes have great famacha. It's just kind of funny. You can check your ewe's teeth and make sure that some of your older ewes don't have any impacted teeth that could be affecting their feed. This is especially good to check on your skinnier ewes. A lot of times an impacted tooth or something like that can be the cause of a ewe not getting the nutrients she needs or the calories she needs. And then most importantly, during this time, body condition scoring. Body condition scoring is independent of weight and body size, which makes it a better measure of nutritional status than just getting a weight alone. It's important, as we've talked about, it can inform you of issues that the ewe may be having before they become serious. An ideal body condition score in the second trimester is around a 3.5. And again, heading into third trimester is about 3.5. You don't want to go too much above that in terms of like into like 4 and 4.5. You can start to have problems with your ewes being too fat. Same goes for skinny ewes. Under about a 2.5 signifies a need for separating and giving supplemental feed. Let's see here. Yeah, so skinnier ewes, you can correct it now. Down when third trimester comes along, you do want to watch those ewes for hypocalcemia and ketosis. Again, check for teeth issues. Same goes for fatter ewes. You can get away with putting them on a little bit of a diet for a few weeks, maybe trying to get them some exercise. And again, watch these ewes for lambing, dystocia, ketosis, and hypocalcemia. Again, during these health checks is a great time to give any vitamin and mineral drenches. If you're doing boluses, you can do your boluses then too. But really, you want to focus on that body condition scoring. This is a good visual of what these numbers mean. So you can see condition 1 is a super emaciated ewe. Condition 5 is a very obese ewe, and we want it kind of right here in the middle. And the way that you check body condition scoring is like this. So on the ewe, you want to go to sort of her back, the back of her spine, behind her rib cage, and before her hip bones. There's this little, maybe like 8-inch section where her short ribs are. And that's where you want to palpate her spine and the end of those short ribs with your hands. And you can feel, you want to feel the spine being rounded and smooth, not super fleshy, not super bony. I really like kind of the transverse processes, the short rib, feeling those. I just feel like it's a great place, even better than the spine, to sort of feel that smooth roundedness. You want to be able to feel the ends of the bones. You put pressure on the ends of the short ribs, you can kind of scoot your fingers underneath. They don't want to be jutting out like fingertips, and you don't want to have to like really, really, jam your hands in to feel them. You want them to be there, a nice cover of fat, but not too fatty. And that can help you sort of um, rate any skinnier or fat ewes that you have. Whoop. We'll talk now about vitamin and mineral needs during gestation. There's a nice mineral feeder there. Someone really dug deep in their photos to find that one. One of the most important mineral or vitamins during pregnancy is vitamin E. There's a lot of studies that have come out that have found that high levels of vitamin E supplementation produce larger, more vigorous lambs with an increased chance of survival. It increases the vitamin E content in the dam's colostrum. The dam and the lamb both have a higher rate of immunity and improved maternal antibody transfer, which is important for those CDT vaccines. 300 international units, up to even 500 international units I've seen recommended per day. It's also vitamin E is necessary for selenium utilization in the ewe. We all know how important selenium is. Vitamin E can be added to a winter mineral mix. It can also be given orally as a drench. It's much better to put it in a mineral mix. This sort of steady daily ingestion of vitamin E is much better than just a one-shot oral drench. So if you have the choice between the two, put it in the mineral mix. Another really important mineral during pregnancy is calcium. Calcium is necessary for muscles to contract, which is especially crucial for the birthing process to go smoothly. A deficiency or overfeeding calcium can lead to hypocalcemia. If you're suspicious of a ewe being calcium deficient, you can get a blood test to confirm that. But for the most part, feed fills calcium needs. Legumes like alfalfa and clover are really high in calcium. So again, when you're getting your hay in and you're kind of like reading your hay and you see a bunch of like little clover blossoms in a batch of second cut, you can say like, oh, that'd be great for late gestation because those legumes really do have a lot of calcium. And there's no, like we've said, there's no need to feed excess calcium during gestation. And save your very calcium-rich hay, like straight alfalfa, if you buy in, save that for lactation. Additional vitamins and minerals that the ewe needs during pregnancy, selenium. Balanced selenium intake has been shown to improve placental growth, improve ewe and lamb immunity, lower placental retention, improve lamb suckling reflex, and improve lamb vitality. And just as the lambs grow up and get older, they generally perform better if they've had that selenium during late gestation. It's recommended up to 90 parts per million in a mineral mix. Iodine prevents the swollen thyroid of a ewe and lamb, which often shows up as a goiter. It improves lamb vigor, and iodine deficient lambs are very weak at birth. Vitamins A and D, which are, like we talked about, they're high in fresh grass, but not as high in hay. So it is important to supplement those. But vitamins A and D provide strong bones and good immunity, and it is necessary to add into a mineral mix during the winter months on dry feed. And lastly, cobalt is an important one for supporting lamb vigor. It also plays a large role in immunity. So we have all these things. So what does that mean? What is a mineral program? How do you kind of get these into your sheep? A mineral program is basically a plan for providing minerals and vitamins to your sheep. This can be free choice minerals, boluses, salt licks, if you're going down that road, but please don't. I think free choice minerals and boluses are the preferred way to get minerals in your sheep. Mineral recipes should be palatable and provide your flock with the nutrients they need. It's helpful to talk with your local shepherds, your extension program and mentors, and build a recipe that fits your land and your flock. Chelated minerals are higher quality and they're more bioavailable to the animal with improved absorption. They are more expensive, but I think, minerals are one of the places where you don't really want to cut corners in terms of cost. It's so worth it to have a good mineral program, high quality minerals, and you just see the effects of that throughout the year, especially during lambing. Um, it's also really helpful to test livers. Yearly at least test a liver or two and see where your mineral levels are at, and you can kind of adjust as time goes on, adjust accordingly. Here on the left are a couple recipes for mineral mixes. This top one is from an old shepherd who had a big flock of Icelandics in Vermont. She would mix her own minerals and buy in all these different things. This is what she would make. A lot of people use just a sheep and goat mineral mix. Goat minerals have the copper that sheep needs, so you do want to add some goat mineral mix to not all sheep, Icelandic sheep. You do want to add some goat minerals to your mineral mix. Kelp and salt are what make minerals palatable and make the sheep want to eat them. So you do want to add in the kelp and salt. Selenium is always just good to have on board, and then vitamin A, D, and E in the winter are good to have on board too. All right, spring shearing, the $1 million question. Do it before or after lambing? It is just personal preference. There's not really a better or worse way to do it. It's kind of up to you. Oh, this is interesting. Okay, we'll start with after. So after shearing, the benefits to shearing after lambing. The benefits to shearing after lambing are obviously the ewes stay warmer. If you're pasture lambing, or you live in a really freezing cold climate, shearing after lambing is often preferable for that reason. Also, by the time you shear after lambing, the wool has all risen. And so when you shear it off, it can produce better fleeces in the fall. You don't get that like cotting and felting from the early fleeces. So shearing before lambing, benefits include the fact that wool holds water. And so shearing all your sheep before lambing provides a drier birth environment. This is especially important more important for barn lambings, creating that drier birth environment. It's cleaner. It also increases the feed intake as the ewes eat more to stay warm. Not necessarily crucial for late gestation, but it is helpful as the ewes' rumens kind of shrink. It does encourage them to keep on eating. Makes it much easier to look for lambing signs, like when udder swell or a ewe's belly drop. It's 100 times easier to see it on a shorn ewe. Lambs are able to find the teats easier. And shearing can also be easier before lambing because the ewes are nice and big, their skin is stretched out, and their babies aren't hollering for them. It's just generally a mellower scene. It's good to shear at least 2 to 3 weeks before lambing too, if you are going to choose to shear before lambing. And let's see, your vaccination schedule is coming right up. Oh, we should talk about that. So CD&T vaccine is the main one that is given during pregnancy. It's given 2 to 4 weeks before lambing. This allows time for the ewe to produce antibodies that can be passed on to her lamb through the milk. So that's really why this 2 to 4 week timing is important, is so that the antibodies are at the highest when the ewe's producing colostrum and they're passed onto the lambs. So if you know your lambing dates, it's easy to figure out. If you don't know your lambing dates, assume kind of mid-April, mid-April, like 10th to 15th is usually the peak for most people in northern climates, I should say. And so you want to administer your CDT vaccine in sort of late March. And then lastly, we'll talk about just sort of a midwinter to-do. It sort of seems like there's not a lot going on this time of year, but there is. So you can order your CDT vaccines now and have them ready for that 2 to 4 week window before lambing, which always kind of sneaks up. You can order ear tags, order vitamin A, D, and E to mix into your mineral mix. Premier One has a really great A, D, and E premix bag that you can just dump into your mineral mix. Order your coccidiostats if you are using a coccidiostat. That's great to start mixing into minerals like a month or so before lambing. You can buy your calcium gluconate and propylene glycol. Those never go bad. they will save your ewe's life, and they're just so handy to have, on hand for those 2 a.m. like what the hell is going on with this ewe moments. So you just buy them, stick them in your lambing kit, and forget about them. Hopefully you'll never need them. You can schedule your shearing, send livers out for testing if you're going to do that. Run through your health check and hoof trims like we talked about. And then it's also helpful to make a plan for feeding during third trimester and lambing. After you do your health checks, you can maybe say, these ewes are a little skinnier. I'm going to separate them and really make sure they get the feed they need. If your lambing season's really spread out, you might want to consider separating your ewes who have lambs from your gestating ewes, because their feed needs will be a little bit different. Lactating ewes should just have free choice feed, really high calcium, high quality feed. So it's just kind of helpful to have a plan of are you going to divide your sheep? What sort of cuts, what hay are you going to feed when? And just sort of map it all out. It makes it a lot easier to not have to sort of think about it and run into problems. And with that, oh my gosh, I just rambled so much. Okay. We can talk about discussion and questions anybody has about lambing. And I hope other people chime in or share stories, or if I missed anything, please feel free to mention. I'm going to stop sharing too. There we go.
Great overview. I think the key with metabolic diseases is that they're mostly to be prevented, and hopefully you never need to treat them. I would note, as far as yes, you can do a blood test for verifying calcium. If it's hypocalcemia, you can also use like ketone strips on the urine. Ketone strips used for like diabetics. But also a really key takeaway is that the symptom overlap between ketosis and hypocalcemia is so high, and these are such crucial life-threatening conditions. Treat first. Don't wait for diagnostics. Don't wait for your vet to be able to come out next, 2, 3 days from now. If you have a ewe that's down, if she's cold, if she's showing symptoms of this, it's better to give her propylene glycol and calcium now than wait.
Yeah, giving propylene glycol and calcium gluconate injections are both, like, you can't hurt the ewe by doing
You
it.
basically treat presumptively for either, because if you try to treat one and you miss it, but it was actually the other, by the time you confirm it was the other, you may have lost some critical treatment time. That's my personal advice. I'm not a vet.
I have a quick question. I did all my hoof trims before breeding. It's been so soggy that I really feel like I need to get in there and trim again. But I'm really reticent to do that at this stage in pregnancy because I'm worried about tipping them. How do you guys feel about like the safety of tipping them right now? Should I wait a few more weeks, or what are your thoughts?
I think it's fine
Earlier the better.
to tip the ewes now. Yeah. I mean, I usually shear before lambing, and the ewes are tipped. And I usually do it like a couple of weeks before lambing. And as long as you are just careful and go slow and don't really wrench them, they should be fine. Is anyone
It's also a good idea to fast them. Again, it's always important to fast before shearing. That's the other reason I don't shear in the last month, hopefully, before lambing, because I also don't want to be fasting pregnant ewes in the last few weeks. So, in the 1 to 2 month range, hopefully closer to 2 month, now's the best time. You can give them just a light fast, skip breakfast, do the hooves in the afternoon kind of thing. It doesn't need to be like a full shearing fast, but they'll be much more comfortable if they don't have a lot of gut fill when you're tipping them. And that applies really to year round, but I don't like to hard fast pregnant ewes in the last few weeks, because that could send a ewe into ketosis, especially if you're shearing right before lambing.
I always shear. Well, I don't always. I've tried it all different ways, but last year I sheared before lambing, because the year before that I sheared after, and they were so saggy baggy elephant. It felt so dangerous. So I did it before lambing this last year, but but I just did it standing. I just did it by hand and I did it
Yeah.
standing one ewe at a time whenever it felt like, their wool was rising or whatever. So that worked well. And then I just didn't do hoof trims until after the lambs.
And you can also trim them standing for their hooves, like in a pig each foot up like a horse.
Mine did that so
Doesn't
much.
work as well, but it might be the right thing for some ewes.
Thanks.
I have a
Kathy,
question
just a
about
question for you.
feeding.
Do you shear before or after, Kathy? Oh, sorry, Chris, I jumped in
No,
there.
it's okay. Go ahead with your question.
Kathy's looking for her mute button, I think.
I think you're still muted, Kathy.
No, is
There
that
it is.
better?
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh, there you
okay. Um, well, I have done it all ways. I used to
Yeah.
always shear after lambing. That was just kind of what I had learned from my early mentors was to do it after lambing because the it was mostly about the wool, so that they would be easier to shear, and then you wouldn't end up with felted tips like we sometimes do if you shear before lambing. So I always used to do it after, but the wool is not my primary focus, so I'm not all that concerned about having some felted tips. I'd much rather take advantage of the benefits of shearing beforehand. That Meg went over them very nicely. So now I have all like maybe for the close to the last 10 years, I've done my shearing before lambing. And since I'm unmuted at this point, I just made a note, Meg, while you were talking, about the different types of hay and when you might want to feed each type of hay and what the benefits are of first, second, third cutting, whatever. Um, just that it's probably obvious to most people, but there's no reason why you can't say you don't have any second cutting hay, for example, and you have first cutting and third cutting. There's no reason why you can't feed one in morning feed. So if you feed twice a day,
Blend it.
you can blend it. So you can give them first cutting in the morning and the third cutting at night, or however it may be, because the first cutting does have qualities that the third cutting doesn't, like Meg mentioned. And so that's kind of what I'm doing right now because I just have sort of late first cutting. Um, and I noticed like I opened a bale of the third cutting and the ewes went wild. Like they thought this was like
Uh-oh.
absolute candy.
Uh-oh. That's a
Compared to
bad
what they'd
sign.
been compared to what they'd been getting. So, I usually only have one bale open at a time, but I noticed pretty quickly that they were like, "Oh, we don't really want to eat this now." Like after two feedings of it, and it was really because they weren't getting like the fiber that they needed. So now I've gone back to giving, I'm feeding both, and it's totally fixed everything.
I think, Kathy, that's a real important point is you just observe how they respond to different food. And sometimes, I usually buy tested hay, but every now and then I get a batch that for whatever reason wasn't tested. And I feel like if they are going a little too crazy after it, that's a bad sign. It's probably too rich for this time of year. Like,
Yeah.
sorry, Chris, you had a question earlier that we accidentally cut you off.
I did, but I'm glad I waited because I was going to go bring us back to hay. So thank you, Kathy, for doing the job for me. Meg, that was a fantastic presentation. First of all, thank you so much for sharing all of that. And we, I'm living over in Minnesota, and we recently moved out from Maine. In Maine, we didn't have the choice of hay. You just fed what you had, and generally speaking, it was pretty awful hay, which is sad, but that's the life in Maine. So here in Minnesota, we've had a lot of fun and challenge because we're still very much learning what we're doing in finding hay. And we found a really, really nice orchard grass that they are absolutely loving, wasting almost none of, and doing a really good job at eating it, and putting on, I think, an appropriate amount of weight. But we had planned to feed out, like, I think it's about a 70-30 mix with alfalfa for the last bit of the last trimester, and then into lambing and that lactation period. But what I'm hearing is that we may want to hold off on the mix, and just feed the orchard that we have if we can make it that far, and wait till lambing, or is it okay to transition to that mix in the last trimester?
I mean, I think it's okay to transition. I think, like, you know, the main takeaway with hay is just like good quality hay you should be in good shape. You don't have to worry too much about it. Are you talking about just in terms of like adjusting the ewes rumen switching, or just like from a nutritional standpoint?
Yeah, I think from a nutritional standpoint, I guess sort of not wanting to give them too much of the alfalfa. It's not like an alfalfa. It's not an alfalfa cut. It's a mix, but not wanting to be too high in alfalfa too early, I guess.
Oh, I
Yeah.
see. Sorry, yeah, okay.
Is it-
That's
You definitely need to watch out for alfalfa before they
yeah,
birth.
you might want to be careful about that. Or if you have another, hey, like Kathy was saying, if you could mix, like feed one in the morning and one in the evening or something. Yeah, just because like those high protein hays with like really rich in alfalfa can grow really big lambs, and it just, you know, maybe you'll be okay, but it could set you up for like lambing.
Kind of playing with fire.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've done it where sometimes I got the only hay I had that was a grass hay was pretty low in protein. Like some of the grass hays we have out here out west are like 7-8% protein, which is very low for growing nutrition for gestation. So every winter I do this little game of playing with fire where I'm using a strategic amount of a little alfalfa in the ration, like 10 to 20% sometimes. But you have to watch out because when you feed, like it's sort of better if you can like top dress it in your feed bunks. Depends on what your feeder setup is, because you could just have those big bully ewes that go vacuum up all the alfalfa. Nobody else is getting any, and they're already fat and already getting too much. Now they're getting more. So you have to really be careful, but you can use a kind of a small amount of a richer hay to sort of dress up a meager hay, especially if, because sometimes it feels like that's all you can get is super rich and then like diet hay. And what they need is something a little more in between.
I feel like a master chef with how I mix things for my sheep, because I'm like what Chris was saying in Maine. Like I'm in Virginia, I have zero choice on hay.
Like
I
that's
get
it. That's what you get.
And the last two
Yeah.
summers have been bad summers. And so I just
Mhm.
do not trust the nutritional value of the hay at all. So I'm always supplementing. This is horse country, so I can get, pellets, and I can get alfalfa or Timothy or orchard. And so like I just mix it all the time. Sometimes I give the ewes only alfalfa. The rams get Timothy. Sometimes I give the ewes a mix. Sometimes I give them only Timothy, just depending on how much protein, calcium I'm trying to throw in there. And right now it's a very marginal amount that I'm giving them, and I just soak the pellets in water, and that's how they come to me, like how I bucket train them, how they come to me. And that when I go out there is I give them this little bit of soaked stuff. But I would like to not do that because it is very expensive.
It's a lot more expensive than baled hay. Yeah.
Exactly, to supplement like that. But anyway, yeah, I feel like I'm always mixing the ratios, looking at the bags, and because that's the only way I can really know actually what their nutrition is.
Very true.
Thank you so much. That definitely helps.
So Grant, to your question in the chat about first cut, it is, yeah, definitely a little stemmier. I was saying that early first cut is the high, has very high nutrition. When it gets to the point where it's really, really sticky, the nutrients have kind of gone out of it. So it is that earlier stuff, which is a little sticky, but my sheep love it. They love first cut, leafy first cut. So it's kind of like a little more about the timing, especially with first cut, that timing is more important for palatability. But something I was curious about, something that I'm kind of always like on the fence about, that I'm curious to hear what people do with is, do people give Bosey shots before lambing? I've kind of gone back and forth with that, and sometime or the past few years I have, but I didn't
I've
mention
done it
that.
both ways. Kind of just like I think anyone doing this more than 5 years is like, well, I've tried it and I've tried it not. Um, Now I'm putting Celplex in their minerals, so I've cut out use of Bosey. But when I was relying on Bosey, I would do a pre-breeding shot, and then I would also do like a midwinter, uh, sometimes at the time of giving them their CDT.
So that was before you started mixing Celplex in
Yeah,
your minerals?
but now that I'm doing Celplex in the minerals, that's supplying all of their selenium needs.
Yeah, that's my understanding too, and that
Mhm.
they don't like having that steady kind of steady daily source of selenium is better than having
Right.
peak and
And
the
that was kind of my thoughts is it was like more of a smooth delivery than peaky. If you need to give them shots, then they need more selenium year-round, period. So
Mhm.
probably better to have that be a little all the time, in my opinion. That being said, I have noticed because of, probably not as much thirst, I've noticed they don't take the minerals in as well over the winter. They're just not nearly as kind of hungry for it. But what I do see this time of year, once the days start getting longer, I feel like the interest in minerals picks back up. Um, but that's something to make sure if you are providing minerals, especially loose minerals, is to make sure they're taking them up because it doesn't matter how good they are if they're not eating them.
Right.
Yeah.
The best mineral in the world, and just sit there.
Oh, and or they just back up to the feeder to scratch their butt on it and then they poop on them and yeah, it's great.
Um, I'm just looking at the chat. So yes, I think selenium e-gel is similar to um, giving shots, and then it provides that sort of immediate, you know, shot of selenium, literally. But having it mixed in minerals is a better way for just to keep their selenium selenium more steady throughout the year, day to
I
day.
can't say I always keep those tubes of the oral selenium e-gel around for acute like emergency cases if I've got a sheep that's off. That's one of those really good supportives. If you're relying that for supplementation, I can tell you that Celplex and vitamin E powder from Premier One are much, much, much cheaper. The tubes are just about the most expensive per head way to go to get them selenium. Bosey is kind of in between, um, but it's yeah. For cost effectiveness, Celplex is actually my preferred. It's much cheaper than the alternative.
Mhm. Yeah, I use that Redmond selenium salt too. That stuff's great. For how much Celplex are you adding in?
Mm.
I don't know the exact math for how to figure that out, although it's out there. I use the recipe that actually is Kathy's mineral recipe, that has the selenium kind of ratio in there.
Is that the one you posted earlier that had
Kathy,
half a scoop of selenium to 1 scoop of salt ratio?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Kathy, can you speak, not to put you on the spot, but do you want to speak to how you determine that recipe?
Okay, I'm unmuted again, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Um, yeah, I mean that recipe I kind of came to over a bunch of years and I've been using the same basic recipe for a lot of years now, although the base loose mineral brands have changed over time. I think I've cut back on the amount of Celplex that I add. And by the way, there are two different concentrations of Celplex. I believe one's a 500 and then there's a 2000. And that may have changed, but I've only ever purchased the 2000, which is the more concentrated form. So with that mineral mix that Meg posted, um, I don't remember your exact numbers on like um, the scoops that you were using of each one. Was it What was it?
Well, I actually adjusted it a little bit because I got some livers tested and saw that my copper and selenium were a little low. So I increased my goat mineral and
Okay.
selenium too that I was mixing in. So I was doing
Okay.
three scoops of sheep mineral, 2 scoops of goat, and then a half of scoop of selenium, just with like
Okay.
yogurt containers. But that's the ratio.
Yeah, so the half of a scoop is 2 cups then.
Yes.
Because that, yeah, so because that's a quart. So I use a little bit less than that, but I've been supplementing heavily with selenium for a lot of years. I still do give BOCI shots um, when we shear in the fall, so that I know that they're well covered with selenium going into breeding season. And depending on the year, I might still give them a BOCI shot when we shear pre-lambing. But last year I didn't, and their selenium levels seem to be fine. So I think if you haven't been monitoring your or adding selenium, the best thing you can do is send in livers for testing to know how you're doing with your mineral supplementation. But it can take years to sort of get their selenium levels built up. So um, I've cut mine back, so I give less than Meg does. But that's because I've been at this and I don't bring in sheep really from other flocks, so I don't have to worry about what was that one's, it's my sheep are pretty like consistent with their selenium levels. So I give 1 cup of selenium 2000 of Supplex 2000 for to 4 cups to 4 scoops of minerals. So if you think of the scoop as a large yogurt container being 1 quart, um, I'd have to get someone else to do the math while I'm talking, but so it's 1 cup to what that be 16 cups, 4 quarts times four. So is it
Yeah.
1 to 16 then? Have I done that right, Diane?
Yeah,
Yeah.
but the big question is the salt ratio because the salt is what's going to dictate their intake.
Yeah, so the mine
Assuming
mine
if
was
the mineral mix is the sole source of salt.
yeah, so my mineral mixes they have they have their own salt in them, but usually like Meg, I'm adding a little bit of extra salt.
Mhm.
And the salt that I use is the same as Meg's, which is the high selenium
The
90.
Redmond,
The
yeah, Redmond
Redmonds,
90.
yeah. So that the different like that still has selenium in it, but it's the less absorbable
It's the
form.
mineral salt form, yeah.
Yeah, so there is a difference. The Cellplex is like an organic chelated form that's much
Yeah.
more absorbable, but you still need the vitamin E, which is like a lot of people forget about that or don't really understand that they have a relationship where they work together. So if the sheep is very low in vitamin E, you can kind of dump all you want of selenium into them, but it might not bring them up to the level they need to be.
Yeah.
So vitamin E is plentiful in fresh grass, this grazing season forages, but when you get into the winter, the dried forages have lost a lot of their vitamin E content. So that's why, Meg, you may have said all this and it went in one ear and out the other, but that's why we want to make sure that we're supplementing with vitamin E over winter, and A, D, and E is, to my mind, the best. Um, did that answer the question?
Yeah. Yeah. That was, thanks. That was really helpful.
Yeah. I actually use both the ADE plus more vitamin E powder from Premier One because when I've looked at the amount of E in the ADE mix, there's some in there, but like they could, if you're giving a lot of selenium, they can still use more E in order to utilize that selenium. Um, I also find that in the summertime when they're on green grass, they technically shouldn't need as much E, but I find it really helps with heat tolerance, E and selenium. And so I kind of just give a lot of E and selenium year round. And again, the most important thing to do is to be doing liver tests to make sure you're not going too high on anything. But It's kind of like, I know it sounds really reductive to say, but the only real rule to feeding is feed to condition. And the only real rule for minerals is test livers and see what needs adjustment, because you've got your water, your soil, the forage growing on your property, the forage you buy in, which could come from any number of places. There's too many variables to just calculate and say, oh, just do a soil test or a water test. The best thing to do is to test the actual sheep themselves and see what they end up needing, um, more, less of particular minerals and vitamins.
Yeah, that's a really important point is that this is all like everything is all just sort of like a basic framework, and the sort of fun and art of shepherding is taking that and then seeing what works in your system or seeing what doesn't work. And I mean, you can't just take everything that I just said and apply it to your flock. You'll probably need to adjust some things, and it
Yeah.
changes year to year too with weather and hay and rain and all those kind of things too. So
Yeah.
it's sort of
I mean,
a
hopefully everybody has a mentor, but ideally, if you've bought sheep from someone that's near you in the similar ecosystem, and if they've got a program that's been working for years, that's always probably your best starting point and then you'll still have to adjust it to your farm and new genetics you bring in and see how things go over time. But as a starting place, that's usually a pretty good one. Is what's been working, and not just working for 1 year, because minerals can kind of accumulate. You can accumulate deficiencies over years, or you can accumulate excess over years. So, a lot of people, they try one thing and like, oh, we're using this new thing this year and it's amazing. It's like, well, see how it is in 2 or 3 more years, because um, it takes a lot of time to show the difference of what's really working long term. So,
yeah, in the form of a handful of lambing seasons and how they go.
right. And
Seasons.
often it's just learning by pain. It's like, oh, that year I fed all that alfalfa before lambing. I never want to do that again because all the monster horn buds and the fat lambs that were stuck. Okay, triage of down sheep. They're not pregnant. They look off. This is from chat. Not eating well, getting skinny. Um, is this a you right now that's in this state, Avery? I don't know if you're able to unmute.
There we go. Hi,
Hey.
we are very new to being shepherds. We've had our sheep for maybe 14 months or so, and this is our second round of lambing. Last year we had no problems. Everybody looked great. It was beautiful. And this year we're running into a lot of problems. And we think a lot of it, based on what we're talking about, is tied to nutrition. We have been doing free choice minerals and salt, but I think our hay hasn't been good as it could be. And so we have a ewe who looked good. She was eating, she was fat, she was running around with everybody. And now she's skinnier. She's not up and walking around like normal. She still is eating and drinking, but we have to almost force her. Like we have to be right there with her and put it in front of her. And I'm not totally sure where to start. It's getting to the point where I think we might call a vet, but I just don't. How do you guys do this when you see something that's not right? What are your first steps? Yes.
What do you think, Kathy? You want to start with this one? Oh, she's still on mute. Quick question. How old is this ewe?
I think, when were they born? 23? 23, sometime in 23, spring of 23.
Okay, so she's not an old ewe. If this were an old ewe, that would probably change what I look into. I'm also going to make a guess. She's probably just still in the middle of her pregnancy, so probably on track for a late March, April delivery. I don't know when you put your ram in or if you're timing that. Um, Also, my other question for you, because in my ecosystem, we have a lot of liver fluke. Liver fluke is something they pick up in the summertime, but they become most symptomatic in fall and winter. And so any sheep that is skinny, not maintaining condition in the wintertime, I do look at flukes. The thing you need to be careful of is the dewormer for flukes is valbazen, which you shouldn't use in early pregnancy. Middle to late pregnancy, it is okay, but you need to know where they are in their pregnancy. I would also want to check teeth, not just the front incisors, but the back molars, but you need to mind your fingers very carefully. Especially if this one ewe is the only one like this. If others in the flock are skinny, having problems with condition, and it sounds like you're having maybe more other problems, but maybe this ewe is the only one in really bad shape. She might be the canary in the coal mine, or she might just be the only one who's having a particular problem. What do
Yeah,
you think, Kathy,
I was
Meg?
going to suggest the same thing and just like looking at what the parasite levels may be. And a
Mhm.
lot of parasites would likely be dormant this time of year, depending on what the climate is. Um, but that would be my first question. Then I would also wonder what the body condition of the ewe was when she came off the pasture and
Mhm.
started onto hay. Um, yeah, and are the rest of them losing condition? It sounds like there's very little appetite, which um, usually if they have low selenium, their appetite still is good. So I
Mhm.
wouldn't think I mean, it could be part of the problem, but yeah, the liver fluke thing I think would cause a weight loss plus maybe diminish the appetite. I've not had that problem here, so I'm not that familiar.
Oh, thank you guys so much for your advice. We have since everybody was out to pasture, and normally in the summer we do rotational grazing, but with the winter we put them in one stagnant pasture and we start feeding out hay and mineral. But we're out in Colorado and we have been getting no snow. It has not been cold at all. It's been 60s. We're starting to get snow now, and I think we're having parasite issues because it's not cold. And so we did have one other ewe when we sheared her late September that was a poorer body condition. She was maybe a 2.5. And we have had her separated for quite some time. We drenched her two different ways at the same time, and she is looking better, but she
Uh-oh, I think we lost Avery.
Yeah, it's always helpful, and especially starting out, it's always helpful to get the vet on board if you can, I don't know, find a time to get him out to your.
supplementation. So we're gonna just keep trying. We're at the feed store now and we're gonna see what we can get her. But I appreciate the recommendations, really.
Yeah, and Avery, feel free to reach out to us via email or online with more specifics for your use, because like that's why we wanted to have this scheduled for now is the time when we can make the most difference that's going to hopefully avoid total disaster at lambing time. Um,
I found this is Carla, and I found if I have somebody who just isn't eating that well, it needs a boost, that bagged chaff hay they just seem to be ravenous for that, and it kind of
that's
bounces
the
them back.
alfalfa silage with molasses in
Yeah,
it, right?
yeah,
That stuff's
yeah,
crack.
yeah. So you
But you
might try
certainly will
while
get
you're at
weight
the
back
feed
on an
store, you
animal.
might pick a bag up if they got it.
It's like rocket fuel.
Also, vitamin B complex shot is a good to give them a boost their appetite
Hmm.
if you're at the feed store.
That's true.
That's another good one to have on hand.
I do have to wonder though, if given that this is the same group of sheep and if they were doing fine last year, but this year it sort of feels like everything's kind of starting to go off the rails, I would want to know if the sheep came from someone in the same geographical area, what the previous owner's mineral and feeding regime was like. Because I've seen this kind of thing happen where if they were on a really high plane of minerals, for example, before, and what you're doing isn't quite right, you get like this sort of honeymoon period for maybe a year as the sheep are burning through their deeper body reserves. And then once those are gone, now the reality of the current management is showing through, and that might be exposing those cracks for you. Um, or it could have been you bought it from someone who dewormed all the time, and if you're not deworming as often, now the sheep are showing that they don't have the resistance they need for where you are, or any number of things. But something to think about.
All right, does anyone else have any questions or thoughts to share?
I I had a question about when you guys were talking about salt, and you were talking, I think Diane maybe mentioned, or maybe you too, sorry, um, that the sheep intake more minerals like because of the salt. So are you, I heard a couple people maybe say that they are, when you have free minerals, is salt separate or are you mixing the salt in or are you kind of
I
doing
put the
both?
salt in. I know some
Okay.
people do run them separate. They have a salt bucket and a
Yeah.
mineral bin. I run my minerals. I basically tune everything to the salt content, and I make it the only source of salt, and that ensures kind of both a minimum and a maximum intake. Because I mean, if they don't like the minerals, they'll still take less of them in. So you still need to pay attention to palatability, but I find it really helps with that variability because they all need salt, and that will essentially keep most of your sheep in a particular band of intake. But that also means you need to really be testing livers and making sure that what you're doing is about right. Um, because if it's free choice and they have salt separately, all bets are off. You don't know what they're taking in.
Yeah, I do add my salt, any additional salt that I use, I add it into the mineral mix, but um there's also sodium bicarbonate, like baking soda that they'll eat it up like salt sometimes, but I think that's something that in feed transition times you want to keep that out free choice. That's just a little
Yeah.
side note on that.
I'll offer bicarb when we're transitioning out to pasture, but also only just here and there because I find that it undercuts the mineral consumption because then they're getting their salt from the bicarb.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Also, but one thing I've also found is that our transition to summer pasture, usually the way I do the feeding is our postpartum ewes, we separate them from the prepartum because we transition them to pretty heavy alfalfa diet. Sometimes it's 100% alfalfa. Kind of depends on what the grass hay that I have is available, but we usually have them on almost 100% alfalfa for about a month after lambing, at which point the grass is ready. So moving from an full alfalfa hay diet to fresh green grass they don't tend to have as much risk of bloat moving out to fresh green grass because they've already been on alfalfa. If you're moving from, grass hay to fresh grass, that's much more dangerous.
Hmm.
So again, that all kind of depends on your growing season and what it's like.
Does
Oh,
anybody
manual graders.
use Redmond has like a conditioner that they say is like to sort of replace the bicarb because it's clay and they say it's like better bio or I think absorbed. Um, they mostly talk about it, I feel like, with cows, but has anybody used that or
I can answer that for my own experience.
yeah.
So um I I use a product called Desert Dynamin, which is similar to the one that you're talking about, the Redmond's conditioner, as a different clay source.
Mm.
My I don't think you can completely substitute one for the other. My my adult sheep will not touch that stuff. So if you're transitioning from one type of feed to another, say going out to, they've been on hay, like regular hay, and then they're going out to spring pasture, then I do think you'd want to have the sodium bicarb available. My lambs eat a ton of this clay, and I'm not sure exactly why that is, but I mean, it's dusty, so I usually cut it 50% with kelp so that it doesn't get them coughing. But they just, if I leave it out plain, they'll eat it like crazy. I mean, it's not like just because I added kelp, they're eating it. They love it.
Hmm.
They eat it more than the minerals. So there's something about it that my lambs seem to want and need. Um, so I wouldn't just substitute the conditioner for
Okay.
the sodium bicarb.
Yeah. Another important thing about a lot of clays, I don't know specifically about this Redmond conditioner or the Dynamin product that you mentioned, Kathy, but a lot of clays and charcoals are used to bind like excess levels of minerals, like to deal with toxics, overdose. And so I would worry that, mixing certain clay products in or having that as part of the regime may be just binding the expensive minerals you're also putting out for them at the same time and potentially nullifying them. So, um, just a thought there.
Yeah, I do not add that into my minerals. It would be offered separately,
Yeah.
in a separate bin.
Yeah.
But I
But
agree
it's
with you.
interesting to see how the lambs are consuming it and like what is that telling us about anything? I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. I I'm 100% certain that it benefits them though I mean because they do seek it out. Um, I don't know why they want it, although I think most of those clays do have a fair amount of iron in them compared to what
Mm.
might be in a mineral mix. At least my mineral mix is not high in iron at all. Can't remember if it has any in it. Um, but I don't think it can hurt the lambs anyway. They seem to do well.
And if it did, you'd probably know by now. So, which is
Yeah.
the value of time in any system.
Yeah.
Yeah. There was a question in chat about minerals and getting rained on. This is a big problem where I'm at. I usually end up, even on the pastured areas, we usually put up at least like a little hoop structure for either shade or rain. So I always have the mineral feeder in there. But I have found that the longer a mineral is sitting out there, the more likely it is to be also pooped or pissed in. So I generally just try to bring a little out at a time because as soon as I stock it full, someone's going to tip it over or crap in it. That's all I can tell you. So
Yeah, they
frequent
they
small
definitely don't
doses.
want to the minerals lose palatability when they get wet. I mean, my if mine get
Hmm.
wet, the sheep won't touch them, but there are some awesome mineral feeders out there that if you have the sheep on pasture, they have a round base that you can just roll it along. It keeps the minerals dry. It has like a wind vane on the top of it, so it steers
Hmm.
it, to keep the rain from coming in there. It's a really good investment because minerals are, if you're buying good minerals, they're really expensive and um, yeah, you don't want them to get rained on for multiple reasons.
Yeah. How do those big weather vane style ones work with bighorns? I'm just curious, Kathy.
Um, well, I get mine from DS Livestock. Um,
Hmm.
they're in Maryland, so they're over on the East Coast. Um, they have two sizes. Like a shorter, smaller opening that is much
Hmm.
better for lambs to get in. And the bigger one can accommodate, I mean, I've never had any horned adult rams not be able to get in there.
Hmm.
So it works fine, the one that I have.
Hmm. Yeah, I just dropped a link in chat to the ones that you mentioned.
But
Um,
there are plenty of other manufacturers who make a
yeah,
similar one.
any like livestock handling systems company, they tend to make these.
Yeah.
Pick the one with the cheapest shipping that's closest to you, your part of the
Yeah, well,
country.
I know that Seidel
Hmm.
has a similar one. I don't know if they have any on wheels. And honestly, the ones when I say a wheel, it's just
The
one
the
round.
circle, yeah.
You'd have to tip it to get it to roll. But I don't know if Seidel has for people who are further out west. Seidel makes some excellent stuff, and they make very good mineral feeders also. I had one of theirs eons ago, and it was on like a
Some of
four
them it's
paw.
just kind of like an X or what's got
Yeah,
legs.
exactly. And those are much
Yeah.
harder to move because you have to pick up the whole thing and
Hmm.
carry it. It's very awkward.
Yeah, I'm seeing some that look like they're on like sort of like sleigh skids, and then some that are on
Uh-huh.
the hoop circle like you described, and then some are more of an X or legs of a table. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's Mel, oh, I don't know her last name. I think she's Grand Valley
Shockman in
Index.
North Dakota.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She posted a little bit ago about she just had like a mineral feeder, like the tray ones on the ground, and she just tacked like a rubber mat, like a car mat on top of it. And taught showed her sheep how to just like nose it up and get in there. And
Yeah,
she's
they make some of those for cows too with the flap.
yeah,
Mhm.
that's could be
Yeah.
like a term, a little cheaper option.
Hmm.
But she spoke really highly of that too for like a quick fix.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, finding a way to have them out there is just really key. Um, what I do in summertime, because mine are on pasture in the daytime, but they come home at night, I just keep the mineral at home in the night pen. Um, Rather than have to schlep it out there as we rotate field to field. But if they were staying out 24/7 during the summer, I would have to have some kind of feeder that was out there, and that also that was portable as you rotate around. So, yeah.
Even when they're inside, I mean, my sheep like scratch on the mineral feed, like they just want to get dumped out. It's like it's
Yeah.
their goal is to
Well, and
just
it's the perfect butt scratching height too, is
yeah.
though if you mount it a little bit higher and then you can always put like a cinder block or like a board for them to step up on, that they can step up with their front legs but not their hind. I think that helps a lot with the butt scratching.
I'd
Yeah, I think I've done that before with a cinder block, so it,
Mhm.
it helps also to just like it will only trim their front hooves, but
No, but it helps wear those down too. That's a good
yeah,
idea.
yeah.
I just bought a dumb little wagon from Harbor Freight, and my son and I are going to build a PVC frame with a little roof on it for a
Ooh,
little mineral tractor.
like a
So
little mineral wagon.
exactly. So if it
Ooh,
works,
I
I'll
like
post
that.
it. It could
Please
be
do.
Yeah.
all the things that you're saying, like the chances of my sheep just knocking it over or climbing
Yep.
inside, like I don't know. But if I can get it to work, then I'll post it.
I'd love to see that when you're done. Because anything that makes it easier, that's kind of the thing. And by the way, some people what they do for minerals, it may help over the winter, it may help over the summer. They just use the long acting boluses, because that is a way to make sure it's inside the sheep. That might be less labor for you than dealing with a feeder and dragging one around and doing all that. Um, but that's also labor to put the boluses in, so it's kind of a pick your poison thing. So, oh, Elaine's here.
All right.
Probably hoping to sneak in unnoticed.
So there was a mention of a goat supplement, adding it into the minerals. So is there a good ratio, safe ratio? Because we were told that too much goat minerals would hurt our sheep.
Yeah, that's true. So I think a safe, I want to hear from other people too, but a safe kind of ratio to start is like 1 to 3, maybe 1 part goat mineral, 3 part sheep minerals. And then you can get livers tested and see if they're getting the copper they need. I started with that ratio and I found that my copper levels were still pretty low. So I um, increased the goat mineral.
I'd say look at the labels. I've seen goat mineral that had 500 ppm of copper. I've seen goat mineral that had 4,000 ppm of copper. Huge difference. So, and also if you use copper oxide wire particle boluses for your sheep, some people think those don't absorb, but they do in fact, just not as much, but they will absorb copper from those. So, um, I use a low copper goat. I don't mix it with sheep, but it's a very low. It's like 300 ppm for copper on the goat mineral that I use. So I just use that exclusively, but I think it really depends on your environment and then also the minerals in question. But um, if you can find a reasonable sheep blend and reasonable goat blend at your local feed store that's economical, that's always a great choice, as long as the quality is decent. Um, not everybody wants to pay shipping and buy the really nice expensive minerals. I do. I've found it to be worth it, but that's hard to recommend to people, um, versus just get the bag of, Purina, Do More, whatever at your local feed store. And then mix it up with the added selenium and E that they definitely need. So, Kathy, thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, mostly it's just what you've just mentioned. I think it comes back to if you're brand new to sheep with, just having gotten them from someone else, like maybe just a year into it, it's hard to know from testing livers if you're in fact your mineral plan is a good one or not. I think it takes a couple years of having the same sheep on your land to get a good picture from testing livers, but it is the foolproof way to assess how, if you're good with copper, if you need more copper, if you need to back off on the copper. And, as Diane said, every goat mineral is different. And it also depends, like if the goat mineral has 500 parts per million of copper oxide, for example, it will not be as much absorbed as if you had a mineral with 500 parts per million of a chelated form of copper. So minerals are very complicated.
Huge
And
topic.
yeah, it's just like different forms of minerals, like zinc sulfate, zinc oxide, the chelated zinc, they're all absorbed differently. Anyway, so it's you could be here for 6 hours and just be getting a basic education on the complexity of minerals, but
And then still end up with more questions than answers.
yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks.
But yeah, definitely check out your labels of what's easily available to you. That's always a good place to start. And again, you just gotta check that feedback loop, see how they're doing, adjust as needed. But it takes years to get your program, I would say, dialed in. And then even when you've got it, what you think dialed in, a year or two later, you're like, something's still not right, or something's creeping or getting worse, or you might have new genetics that have different requirements. I don't know about you, Kathy, but I feel like the more muscled sheep with more carcassy lines, I feel like they need more vitamin E and selenium than the
Totally.
really lightly built ones do.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because
If you're running a flock of leader
selenium
sheep,
is
you may
just,
not need to supplement E and selenium. I mean, I don't know.
yeah,
Yeah.
no, absolutely. I've seen that for
Yeah.
sure. And yeah.
It's like more muscle, they need more selenium and E to power that muscle. It's
Mm-hmm.
kind of how it seems.
Mm-hmm.
Healthy copper level range. I follow the testing reference range for the lab. Um, the notion that Icelandics can tolerate more copper, yes, they can, and they do need more copper, but the clinical reference range, I think, is still pretty much what you'll see is that an Icelandic, maybe especially a colored pigment fleeced one, being fed extra copper might have the same clinical, level of copper concentration in their liver as a white breed of commercial sheep that's being fed almost no copper at all. The clinical reference values should be on target, basically. But you can feed, or you may need to feed, a lot more copper to get there with an Icelandic. Does that answer the question? I will note, by the way, the big thing we keep talking about with liver tests requires a cull animal because it's a postmortem test on liver. But you can get blood tests done for certain things, but and that can help, but just with the caveat that things like copper, which accumulate in the liver, you can't get a true representation of copper toxicity unless you're testing the liver on a postmortem animal. Because it can basically be stored there, and they can have normal copper levels, but they can have a toxic level stored in their liver. I guess if you had low copper, you could show that with a blood test, but you can't really show high copper on a blood test unless they're in actual copper release crisis, in which case they're going to be dead soon anyways. Sorry to say, but so you can do some blood testing for certain things, but it's going to be a little limited. But I know that that's hard, especially if you're starting out and you may not have any animals ready to cull yet, or none that you're ready or wanting to yet. And how do you know where to start? That's why I say start with your mentor's recipe if the sheep are in about the same area in a similar place of the country.
I think you threw them in there. Okay.
In regards to testing for copper in the liver, do you guys oh no.
Yeah, we
Am
can
I
hear you.
muted? Unmuted.
No, we can hear you.
Oh, okay. I hit a button on accident. So if it takes a few years for your minerals to kind of show, would you then not test if you're butchering your lambs because it wouldn't really reflect your minerals, or would you test an animal that's maybe you're culling or is a little older?
If you were calling it lamb, that's kind of a weird question.
I think lambs can give you some early answers because
Okay.
they're actually going to be a pretty good reflection of the ewe's maternal status and how she was fed during gestation and how it grew on your property. I feel like the skew is more likely with an older adult sheep, especially if you brought one in from another flock, where they might have had a higher level of minerals. So I do test my lambs, and it's important to let the lamb know because they will often have different reference ranges for a young versus an adult animal. Ideally, you can probably your perfect test would be, a 2 to 3 year old cull that was born on your farm to a ewe that had lived on your farm and, was raised in your program. But I would definitely encourage you to test lambs. In fact, that's the cull that most of us have available most readily.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, any other questions? That was great discussion. I learned a lot.
Yeah. But get out there and feel those ewes. You can't tell body condition by looking at them. You have to feel them.
Yeah. Oh, that's another thing I forgot to mention during the presentation is you also can't tell how many lambs you experience. So don't be like, oh, that you looks like she has
Surely she's carrying triplets. That's a ram, ma'am.
Yeah, I meant to say that during the ultrasound section. Yeah, you can't assume just assume twins. One winter ewes, if you breed one winter, is usually single. Otherwise, assume twins unless you're doing ultrasounds.
I think that's a safe assumption.
I had a really quick question. I know that, and thank you. This has been so helpful. And I know this conversation is about ewes, but really quickly on the boys, on the rams, do you guys do anything special for them over the winter? Are you including them in these body score condition checks, or do you just kind of be like, you guys,
you're on your own, boys. See you in
you're on
summer.
your own?
I mean, I know. I'm pretty I'm pretty the rams get the crappiest hay and they are just kind of hanging out and they have their minerals and I don't really think about them too much personally, but
yeah, I'm a mix of sorry boys, you're on your own versus but I do still check their body condition. Just know that most rams this time of year, they're at their worst behaviorally and conditionally. They're run down from breeding season. They could certainly use a boost, because they've just been through annual ram fat camp, I call it, which is breeding season. So, it's a good idea to, especially if they're living out, living rough all winter, like most of mine do. I'll give them a little more protein and a little extra pampering this time of year to help them rebuild. But I would say though is when I had a much smaller flock, my ram would kind of live full time with the ewes. And what I found was that he was pigging out on their hay while they needed it more. And especially in late gestation, it's a good idea to kick the ram out, both nutritionally and behaviorally, because ewes in late gestation can start smelling kind of confusingly, interestingly to rams. So, yeah.
Okay, great. Thanks. I like that. I like the answer. Don't do too much.
Right. But our rams also get to go out first to pasture and they capture that
Mhm.
first green flush of, when I've still got the ewes locked in for lambing because I lamb my ewes out in the barn. So my rams get first crack at the pasture. So that's also their recovery plan.
I do like to trim hooves, like all of the midwinter health check stuff. I do that for the rams too. Um, with hoof trims.
Yeah, it's so wet where I'm at that I really need to, quarterly hoof trims are what I generally aim for because if those hooves are long, we get these wet, long springs. That's really asking for hoof problems. If you're really dry, maybe it's not as bad, but where I'm at, it's just a swamp. So yeah, hoof trims for everybody.
Anybody else have anything?
Well, thanks, and that was very well done.
Yeah, thank you so much, Meg.
Thanks for coming, everybody. And yeah, if there's any follow-up questions, then yeah, send an email to the group or put it in Facebook or anything. It'd be good to keep this conversation going.
Yeah, good stuff.
But oh, here's one more. Just back at the Bosie. So another question about Bosie, intermuscular subcutaneous versus oral. I found notes from a lambing class a vet taught that runs a big herd of sheep, not Icelandic, but she said the injection lasts 10 days and the gel is daily when treating during lambing for ewes. Yeah, I think that's accurate. I think that's why people want to mix the selenium into the minerals is because you get that daily they get that daily ingestion, but you don't have to catch them every day and put gel in their mouth.
Yeah, that they just spit out that expensive gel into the bedding. My favorite. One thing I have seen, if you look at the labels on Bosie versus the oral gel is mostly vitamin E. The Bosie is mostly selenium with very little E. Um, I have at times, if I had an animal that I was sure was having white muscle disease, used both kind of in companionship with each other. But the big thing is you can OD them on an injectable. It's very hard to OD them orally. That's my main takeaway. So if you're not sure, if you're thinking maybe this will just help, I would prefer to stick to oral formulations for that reason alone. I'd love to see that source though, Danielle, to get more kind of context.
It was a lambing class I took that's put on by the Washington State Sheep Producers.
Oh, good.
And it's Jill Swanick. They have, I think, like a few hundred, I think like 300 or 400 head of sheep in Eastern Washington. But her and her daughter, they're both vets, teach it. And that's something I just wrote in my notes from the class.
Yeah, especially in a large flock range situation, I would probably just give the shot and done. Because, I mean, who has time to catch that ewe 10 days in a row? Right there. So,
yeah, she was just talking about it in reference to like if you do one versus the other, just be like conscientious that if you do the oral, you have to treat more often. But yeah.
Yeah, I would agree.
All right. Well, if no one has any other questions, maybe we'll wrap this up and let everyone get on with their evening.
Yeah.
But
thanks so much, Meg, for putting this together.
Yeah, thanks everybody for showing up and taking time out of your Sunday. I appreciate it.
You bet.
All right.
Bye.
End it. Bye. Thanks, everyone.